The Amazon rainforest. At first glance, it is a paradise, an endless emerald sea stretching farther than the horizon itself, alive with the cries of unseen creatures and the hum of life in every direction. But beneath its beauty lies something else. Something ancient. Something forgotten. For centuries, explorers, scientists, and dreamers have ventured into this ocean of green, only to return with whispers, stories of colossal stone structures, labyrinthine roads, and temples swallowed whole by the relentless jungle. The Amazon has long been painted as a wild, untamed frontier, home to scattered tribes and fleeting myths, but never a stage for grand civilizations. At least, that's what we've been told. Yet recent discoveries hint at a reality far stranger, and far more unsettling. Beneath the tangled vines and choking roots, evidence emerges of sprawling cities that once rivaled the great empires of the Old World. Roads carved with mathematical precision, earthworks that defy explanation, and ceremonial centers aligned not with chance, but with the stars themselves. But if these lost cities truly existed, why were they erased from history? Why do textbooks still insist the Amazon was never home to advanced civilizations? Is it ignorance, or deliberate silence? This is not just a question of archaeology, it is a question of our past, our origins, and the uncomfortable possibility that humanity's story is far older and far more complex than we dare to admit. As we journey into the heart of the Amazon, the air grows heavier, the shadows deeper. The deeper we look, the more the jungle seems less like a wilderness, and more like a crypt. What secrets lie beneath this green abyss, waiting to be unearthed? And why, after centuries, are they only now beginning to surface? For decades, the official story painted the Amazon as a place where civilization could never thrive. According to academic consensus, the rainforest was simply too hostile, too unforgiving. The soil, they claimed, was too poor to sustain farming. The rivers were unpredictable, the climate brutal. Any attempt to build great cities here, we were told, would have been doomed to failure. In this narrative, the Amazon was a wilderness, a green desert where only scattered tribes could survive, never the heart of an empire. But the further back we go into historical records, the more cracks begin to show in this tidy version of events. Early European explorers, men who pushed their way into the Amazon in the 16th century, wrote journals that tell a very different story. These were not just tales of hardship and starvation. They described vast settlements along the riverbanks, teeming with people. Some claimed to have seen intricate stone causeways, temples rising from the forest, and fertile fields stretching farther than the eye could see. Take Francisco de Orellana, for example, the Spanish explorer who navigated the Amazon River in 1542. His account spoke of advanced societies numbering in the tens of thousands, complete with fortified towns and organized agriculture. Yet, almost immediately, his testimony was dismissed as fantasy. Scholars branded it exaggeration, insisting Orellana had mistaken small villages for grand cities, or perhaps fabricated his tale to impress the crown. The official story was reinforced, no great civilization could have flourished here. Still, whispers persisted. Missionaries, soldiers, and traders who followed in Orellana's footsteps sometimes echoed his words, speaking of ruins hidden in the jungle, of strange earthworks and mounds that defied explanation. But each time these accounts surfaced, they were quietly folded back into the myth category, legends of El Dorado, cautionary tales of explorers chasing mirages. Yet ask yourself, why did so many independent witnesses report similar things? Could they all have been wrong, or is it possible that history was rewritten to fit a cleaner narrative? The Amazon as an impenetrable void suited a particular worldview, a world where Europe, not the rainforest, was the cradle of real civilization. Today, the debate remains unsettled. On one side stand the textbooks, insisting on the impossibility of large-scale societies in such an environment. On the other, scattered clues, first-hand accounts, ruins glimpsed and then swallowed by vines, and discoveries that science is only now beginning to confirm. And so we find ourselves caught between two stories, the one we've been taught, and the one that refuses to stay buried. The first Europeans who ventured into the Amazon were not scientists with satellites or archaeologists with drones, they were desperate men with swords, crosses, and dreams of glory. In 1542, the Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana sailed down the Amazon River on a journey that would alter how the world imagined the jungle. His reports were filled with dazzling tales, golden cities glimmering in the distance, powerful warrior women, and vast settlements where thousands thrived. To his audience back in Spain, it sounded like myth wrapped in conquest. And yet, his descriptions were uncannily detailed, too vivid to be dismissed outright. Jesuit missionaries followed in the 17th century, their motives different but their stories strangely similar. They wrote of sprawling villages with carefully laid out roads, fields of manioc and maize, and causeways so straight and enduring they seemed to defy the swampy terrain. One priest described an earthen causeway stretching for miles, vanishing into the dense curtain of trees. To the missionaries, these were not cities of gold, but signs of organized societies, complex, agricultural, and sophisticated. Their letters reached Europe, whispering of an Amazon far older and more advanced than outsiders imagined. Yet as centuries passed, these accounts were met with skepticism and even ridicule. Historians in the 18th and 19th centuries dismissed Orellana's writings as delusions born of hunger and fever. After all, how could a civilization of millions thrive in a rainforest that seemed hostile to permanent settlement? The narrative hardened: the jungle was a counterfeit paradise, lush on the surface, but incapable of sustaining true civilizations. Scholars insisted the soil was too poor, the environment too unforgiving, for anything beyond scattered tribes. But here lies the tension: Orellana's reports were not isolated. Time and again, from explorers to priests, different voices described eerily consistent visions, large populations, structured societies, and signs of monumental earthworks. Were they all hallucinating in the same way? Or was something real, something vast, being erased by time and vegetation? The jungle itself became the great eraser, swallowing evidence beneath layers of roots and vines. By the time 19th-century explorers returned, the grand causeways and plazas were hidden, the villages reduced to whispers in the undergrowth. This gave skeptics the upper hand. Absence of proof, they claimed, was proof of absence. The Amazon, they said, had always been wilderness, untouched and unshaped. And yet, cracks in that narrative persisted. Oral traditions among indigenous groups spoke of ancestors who lived in great towns, of ceremonial mounds and roads that once stitched communities together. These voices, ignored by many scholars, hinted that Orellana's visions might not have been madness, but memory. This clash, between what the jungle concealed and what the explorers claimed to see, set the stage for centuries of debate. Were these chronicles early glimpses into a forgotten civilization, or the exaggerated dreams of desperate men lost in an alien world? As we move forward, the question grows sharper: can modern science, with its satellites and excavations, finally prove what those first explorers swore they saw with their own eyes? Beneath the dense green canopy of the Amazon, a secret world lies hidden. For centuries, explorers looked at this rainforest as a realm of unbroken wilderness, untouched by the hand of civilization. Yet, from the skies, technology has begun peeling away the veil, exposing something astonishing: patterns in the soil that should not exist naturally. Perfect squares, massive circles, and long, ruler-straight lines etched into the earth, structures so immense they only reveal themselves when viewed from above. The story begins with LiDAR, light detection and ranging, technology that fires millions of laser pulses through the forest cover. Unlike the human eye, it can strip away leaves, vines, and branches, leaving behind a skeletal model of the land beneath. And what that skeletal model shows is jaw-dropping. Across wide stretches of the Amazon, enormous geometric earthworks appear, straight-lined roads cutting across jungle, plazas the size of football fields, and foundations suggesting buildings that once stood proudly where today only silence reigns. These formations are not random. They're too precise, too measured, too deliberate. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast clearing, the soil beneath your feet carved centuries ago into perfect symmetry. This is not the work of chance or erosion. It is the handwriting of a people who once bent the jungle to their will. Mainstream archaeologists initially resisted this idea. For decades, the Amazon was thought to be an inhospitable place where only small, scattered tribes could survive. The soil, known as terra firme, was believed too poor to support large-scale farming. In that view, the Amazon was a green desert, lush on the surface, but barren when it came to sustaining complexity. Yet the evidence emerging from LiDAR tells a different story. The scale of these earthworks implies planning, coordination, and a population numbering in the millions. Some of these sites, when reconstructed digitally, look more like cities than villages. Straight roads stretch for miles, connecting what appear to be neighborhoods, ceremonial spaces, and possibly even defensive structures. When scientists overlay these LiDAR maps onto the terrain, a chilling realization emerges: the Amazon may have once hosted urban centers larger than medieval London. This discovery doesn't just rewrite South American history, it challenges our very assumptions about what civilizations looked like. Western history often places monumental achievements in the hands of Egyptians, Mesopotamians, and Greeks. But here, deep in the jungle, another advanced culture may have thrived, hidden from the textbooks, swallowed whole by time and trees. And yet, there is tension. Not all scholars agree. Some argue these are ceremonial landscapes rather than true cities, designed for rituals rather than daily life. Others say the numbers being thrown around, cities bigger than London, are overstatements. The soil is poor, they insist, long-term sustainability of millions of people here would be impossible. But then again, the existence of terra preta, man-made fertile soil scattered across the Amazon, suggests these people may have found ways to outweak nature itself. It's a debate that leaves us at the crossroads of science and speculation. The geometric earthworks are undeniably there. They cannot be erased. What remains in question is their meaning. Were they the skeletons of forgotten cities, or ritualistic stage sets for a society whose true scale we still underestimate? One thing is certain, this was no untouched wilderness. The Amazon bears scars of human ambition, scars large enough to be seen from the heavens. And as we follow those scars deeper into the earth, they begin to point towards something even more mysterious: the lost temples that may still be waiting in silence, concealed beneath the jungle's endless green. Deep within the heart of the jungle, where sunlight struggles to pierce the thick green canopy, whispers speak of temples the world was never meant to see. These are not the grand pyramids showcased in history books or the ruins mapped by archaeologists. No, these are places shrouded in taboo, sacred to the people who still remember them, and hidden from outsiders who dare to intrude. For centuries, stories have circulated about sanctuaries where stone walls still echo with chants to sky gods, and where rituals blurred the line between this world and the next. Among the Yanomami of the Amazon, there are tales of the houses of the star people, hidden deep within the forest, where shamans claim their ancestors once communed with beings descending from the heavens. The Tucano people speak of sacred enclosures, places so charged with spiritual energy that even the most seasoned elders warn outsiders never to approach them. According to oral tradition, those who enter without permission risk madness, illness, or worse, disappearance into realms unseen. Yet the jungle has never failed to lure the bold and the desperate. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers fueled by curiosity and greed began pushing into uncharted territories of South America. Reports surfaced of European expeditions stumbling upon strange ruins, only to vanish without a trace. Their last entries, preserved in scattered journals, describe towering stone doorways draped in vines, bizarre carvings of half-human, half-cosmic beings, and an oppressive silence as though the very air carried a warning. One diary, later recovered from a deserted camp, ended abruptly with the words, "The temple breathes." The rest remains a mystery. But what exactly were these forbidden temples? Some scholars believe they were ancient sanctuaries where priests and elders conducted rituals of sacrifice, not in worship of mere gods, but as an offering to celestial visitors. Others suggest they were energy centers, deliberately placed on ley lines that crisscrossed the earth, amplifying unseen forces. Those who follow this theory argue that indigenous traditions may have preserved fragments of forgotten science, cloaked in the language of myth. At the same time, modern archaeologists caution against such leaps. They argue that many of these accounts are exaggerations, born from colonial imagination and the fear of unfamiliar landscapes. To them, the forbidden label was less about cosmic mystery and more about cultural boundaries, sites where indigenous communities deliberately kept outsiders away to preserve their traditions. What seemed to European explorers like supernatural warnings may have simply been coded messages: "You do not belong here." Yet the contradictions only deepen the allure. Consider the so-called vanished expedition of 1937, a small group of treasure hunters who ventured into the upper Orinoco Basin, following rumors of a lost temple of gold. Weeks later, only fragments of their equipment were discovered: rusted machetes, a torn canvas tent, and a half-buried camera with film too water-damaged to reveal its secrets. Locals claimed they had trespassed into a temple of the ancients, a place guarded not by human hands, but by the spirits of the forest itself. Even today, satellite imagery occasionally reveals puzzling anomalies: rectangular clearings, unnatural alignments of stone, or geometric mounds swallowed by vegetation. Scientists often explain these as remnants of long-lost agricultural sites or pre-columbian earthworks. But to those who listen to the myths, they could be the last fingerprints of temples that once housed forbidden knowledge. And perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in the temples themselves, but in the silence surrounding them. Indigenous elders rarely describe their details openly, speaking instead in fragments, warnings, and riddles. To reveal too much, they say, would disturb forces that prefer to remain hidden. So the question lingers: were these temples real sanctuaries of stone, lost in the jungles of time? Or are they something far older, far stranger, monuments to a forgotten covenant between humanity and the unknown? The deeper we go into these stories, the more the lines blur. What explorers dismissed as superstition may conceal truths modern science is only beginning to glimpse. And as we push forward, we must ask ourselves, if the temples are truly forbidden, what price will be paid by those who dare to uncover them? Because in the jungle, silence is never empty. It is a warning, waiting to be heard. For centuries, the guardians of official history have worn the cloak of certainty. Archaeologists, historians, and scientists present timelines as though they are unshakable, carved in stone. Yet beneath this facade of authority lies an uncomfortable truth: science, at times, chooses silence over upheaval. When discoveries threaten to unravel carefully curated narratives, the findings are often ignored, dismissed, or quietly buried in academic footnotes. Why? Because rewriting history is not just inconvenient, it is destabilizing. Consider the politics of funding. Excavations that align neatly with accepted history are showered with grants and recognition. But when evidence emerges that suggests civilization is far older than textbooks allow, the doors of funding mysteriously slam shut. The guardians of knowledge, it seems, are less interested in truth than in protecting a timeline that supports their careers, reputations, and authority. To admit they were wrong is to invite chaos into their own institutions. This is not a modern phenomenon. Think of Troy, once dismissed by scholars as nothing more than Homer's poetic imagination. For decades, any suggestion of its reality was met with ridicule. Yet Heinrich Schliemann, armed with conviction and persistence, unearthed its ruins, proving that myth had always been fact. If Troy could rise from the ashes of myth, what other so-called legends might be waiting for validation? Atlantis? Lost temples beneath the sea? Forgotten civilizations swallowed by time? But beyond reputation lies a deeper motive: control. History is not simply about the past, it is about identity, power, and who gets to define the story of humanity. A discovery that civilization began thousands of years earlier than we believe doesn't just change dates on a timeline. It redefines who we are. It questions the uniqueness of modern societies. It challenges religious, political, and cultural structures that depend on a certain version of the past. This silence, then, is not accidental, it is strategic. By ignoring anomalies, science preserves order. It protects its institutions from the uncomfortable mess of uncertainty. And yet, cracks in the narrative continue to spread. Every uncovered ruin, every unexplained artifact, every anomaly whispered in hushed tones adds weight to the question: how much does science already know, and how much has it chosen not to tell us? The silence of science is not absence. It is a presence, an echo that grows louder the more it tries to be contained. And like Troy, one day the walls of silence may collapse, revealing that the myths we dismiss were fragments of truth all along. And this brings us to the unsettling thought: if history has been rewritten before, what other forgotten civilizations might be waiting for their voice to be restored? They called it the Green Hell. A place where the trees rose like towers, the rivers slithered like serpents, and the air itself seemed to press down upon the human spirit. For centuries, the Amazon has been more than a jungle, it has been a living labyrinth, guarding secrets with jealous ferocity. And those who dared to search for what lay hidden within its depths often paid the ultimate price. One name echoes above them all: Percy Fawcett. In 1925, this decorated British explorer ventured into the rainforest with a single burning obsession: the fabled lost city of Z, a supposed cradle of civilization that he believed lay buried beneath the endless canopy. He was no reckless adventurer, he carried maps, notes, and theories. But none of that mattered to the jungle. Fawcett and his party marched into the green abyss, and never returned. No bones, no belongings, no trace. Just silence. Some whispered he had been killed by hostile tribes. Others insisted the city itself swallowed him, that the ruins were cursed, punishing those who trespassed too close to forbidden knowledge. His disappearance ignited a fever that gripped countless others. Expeditions followed, drawn by the same intoxicating promise: lost temples, treasures of unimaginable worth, the chance to rewrite history itself. But time and again, those expeditions unraveled into nightmares. Insects that carried death in their bite. Rivers that drowned men in minutes. Fever that burned explorers alive from the inside. The jungle, it seemed, had an arsenal of invisible weapons. By the mid-20th century, stories began to pile up like grim warnings. A team of Brazilian explorers who set out with radio equipment in the 1930s never sent another signal. A group of American treasure hunters in the 1940s reportedly found shards of strange stone walls deep in the forest, only for their diaries to end abruptly, with final pages describing the sense of being watched under the moonlight. Locals who retraced their paths found nothing but shredded camps and equipment rusting under vines. But it was not just nature or chance that explorers feared, it was the legends whispered by those who lived closest to the ruins. Elders of the Kayapo and Xingu tribes warned of cursed places, where spirits stalked the trees and intruders vanished without a sound. They told of ruins that breathe, places where shadows lingered even under the noon sun. To them, these were not metaphors. They were warnings. And many believed Fawcett had ignored them. Even in recent decades, when helicopters and satellites began mapping the forest, researchers reported strange patterns, geoglyphs, straight lines, and mounds that suggested ancient civilizations once thrived there. Yet when teams attempted to reach these sites, the jungle seemed to fight back. Malaria outbreaks struck. Equipment malfunctioned. In one chilling case, an anthropologist claimed to have stumbled on moss-covered walls too uniform to be natural. Weeks later, he abandoned his research altogether, declaring that some ruins are better left undiscovered. And so, the myth of the cursed expeditions lives on, a blend of documented tragedy, tribal legend, and the irresistible human hunger for discovery. The Amazon's ruins remain a siren's call, daring adventurers to prove the impossible. But the deeper question is this: are these deaths the price of human arrogance against nature, or the evidence of something more, something deliberately hidden, something guarding the last temples of a forgotten world? The jungle, after all, does not give up its secrets easily. And for those who still dream of the lost city of Z, the silence of Percy Fawcett's fate whispers a chilling reminder: the Amazon keeps what it claims. For centuries, myths have acted as the bridge between memory and imagination, carrying fragments of truths across oceans of time. When we look at the mysterious temples said to be hidden deep in the Amazon, the stories surrounding them are not isolated whispers of a lost jungle world, they echo in the legends of distant civilizations. Consider the Mesoamerican myths that speak of gods arriving from the east, bearing knowledge, architecture, and laws. In the codices of the Maya and the carved reliefs of the Aztec, there are figures described as pale, bearded, and foreign, who came across the sea bringing gifts of civilization. To mainstream archaeology, these are symbolic myths, allegories for cycles of creation and destruction. But to others, they may represent a memory of contact, an arrival that resonates eerily with tales from South America's rainforests. Could the Amazon temples be the missing stage of that journey? Then there is the legend of Atlantis. Plato described an advanced civilization swallowed by water, its people scattered across the world. Many modern researchers dismiss it as allegory, but the parallels are haunting. Both Atlantis and the supposed Amazonian temples are tied to rivers, floods, and a mastery of stone and astronomy. Some theorists suggest that survivors of Atlantis spread their knowledge, seeding cultures that later bloomed into the Inca, the Maya, and perhaps even the mysterious jungle builders. The symmetry of these myths, across continents and centuries, feels less like coincidence, more like the fragments of a forgotten mosaic. Even in the high Andes, thousands of miles away, the sun temples of the Inca mirror patterns we find whispered in Amazonian legends. Circular stone structures aligned with solstices. Sacred geometry carved into the earth itself. The Andes and the Amazon were not isolated worlds, rivers, trade routes, and shared myths bound them. If temples of the jungle aligned with those of the mountains, could it suggest a greater network, an unseen civilization that once spanned half a continent? Science will say myths are just cultural poetry, shared themes that naturally arise as humans grapple with the stars and the cycles of nature. But there is another possibility, that myths are echoes of memory, distorted by centuries of retelling but rooted in events once real. Perhaps the gods from the sea were explorers. Perhaps Atlantis was not a myth but a memory of collapse. And perhaps, hidden beneath vines and roots, the Amazon still holds the ruins that could prove these connections true. If so, uncovering the temples would not just rewrite South American history, it would challenge the way we see myth itself, not as fiction, but as the encrypted history of humanity. For centuries, the ruins hidden beneath dense jungles and shifting sands have remained whispers on the edge of human history. But imagine, just for a moment, that tomorrow a team of explorers cuts through the undergrowth, brushes away the vines, and steps into the shadow of an intact lost temple. The implications would be nothing short of earth-shattering. First, it would rewrite how we view so-called primitive tribes. For decades, textbooks have dismissed many ancient cultures as rudimentary, surviving with only basic tools and oral traditions. Yet the discovery of advanced temples, designed with precision, aligned with the stars, and perhaps encoded with forgotten knowledge, would reveal that these civilizations were far more sophisticated than modern scholars have admitted. It would not just be an archaeological find, it would be a rewriting of humanity's origin story. Consider the possible knowledge encoded within those walls. Ancient medicine, long dismissed as superstition, might be revealed as a lost science. Strange carvings could point to herbal cures more effective than modern pharmaceuticals, remedies developed through centuries of observation and experimentation. The temples could contain star charts and astronomical alignments, proving that ancient priests tracked celestial events with uncanny accuracy, knowledge rivaling that of modern observatories. Were they primitive, or were they the guardians of a cosmic science we've only just begun to rediscover? Then there is the engineering itself. If these temples stand intact, constructed with megaliths weighing dozens of tons, the question becomes unavoidable: how were they built? Did ancient builders possess forgotten techniques that defy today's heavy machinery? Were they working with an understanding of sound, magnetism, or geometry that we have overlooked? The very stones might whisper secrets that collapse the timeline of human development. And yet, every revelation would raise an even more unsettling question: why has this knowledge remained hidden? Is it because time and nature simply swallowed it whole? Or is there a darker possibility, that powerful institutions, ancient or modern, have deliberately buried these truths to preserve a version of history that keeps humanity small, divided, and unaware of its true potential? If such a temple were unveiled, the psychological shock would ripple across the world. The public would not only marvel but also begin to question. If our ancestors were capable of such feats, what else have we underestimated? What else has been erased? Are we standing on the ruins of a forgotten golden age, one that could illuminate the future if only we dared to uncover it? Perhaps that is the true fear. Because if these temples are found, humanity will no longer be able to cling to the safety of the narrative we've been told. We will be forced to confront the possibility that history is not a straight line of progress but a cycle of rise and fall, and that we may only be one catastrophe away from forgetting everything once again. And so the mystery remains, suspended between discovery and suppression, between the possibility of enlightenment and the shadow of concealment. If the temples are found, the world will never be the same. The jungle does not simply hide the past, it consumes it, digests it, and then quietly lets fragments slip through cracks of vine and stone. Every crumbling pillar, every half-buried carving is not just a ruin, it is a whisper, a reminder that civilizations once thrived here, writing their stories in stone only for nature to reclaim them in silence. For centuries, explorers, archaeologists, and adventurers have tried to peel back the green curtain, believing that if they push hard enough, the jungle will surrender its secrets. But the truth is more haunting, the jungle is not just a backdrop. It is an active guardian, fiercely protective of what lies beneath. Floods, storms, strangling roots, these are not accidents of nature. They are defenses, as if the earth itself has chosen to shield the memories of its lost temples. Science offers us tools, LiDAR scans, satellite images, carbon dating, peeling back layers unseen to the naked eye. And yet, for every secret revealed, 1,000 more remain buried, untouched, unyielding. Myths tell us these places were never meant to be found, that the gods or ancestors demanded they sink into the soil. Between fact and legend, the truth hangs in a delicate balance, waiting for us to decide how far we dare go. And so we are left with a paradox: the jungle destroys, but in that destruction, it also preserves. It erases history even as it guards it, holding treasures just beyond our reach. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine the dark canopy swaying above temples no human eye has seen in centuries. Imagine the roots tightening their grip, as though whispering, "Not yet, not yet." The question lingers: will the jungle ever allow us to see everything it hides, or are some secrets meant to stay buried forever?